for context for everybody, any first timers, Joe is one of our regulars, and Joe's been on a bunch of other times. He's still yet to convince his team to join us and do a mock cold call, but he always leads by example and comes on for his team. So, but you really need to clip that. The team need to clip that moment. That was brilliant.
Yeah, sorry, IT issue that I was fighting with one of my new starters, so I was hoping I could have waited a bit. But thanks for having me on again, guys.
No problem at all.
Absolutely. Cool. So what's the scenario here, Joe? What are we dealing with today?
So we're going to be bringing a new service to market next year. So I want to test out the pitch for that. Ideally, I'd like to pitch directly to Dave and almost in your real persona. I know it's not going to be quite exactly your responsibility, but I'm hoping you're going to have enough context around it that we can have a good little test here.
Okay, what a prospecting tactic! Come on someone's webinar to pitch them. That's brilliant. Yeah. I think we can definitely do that.
So yeah, I want to do around incident response planning and tabletop exercises. So what you do if you are hacked, or those policies and procedures, because I know you're obviously ISO compliant, etc. And a lot of insurance companies are pushing it towards businesses like you. So we're getting a load of warm engagement around it. So I'm seeing if we can also prospect cold people doing that as well.
Okay, so you're really testing me. You're about to test me on the internal policies of Cognism and how they work. I really hope my legal team isn't watching this, or the security team.
You don't need to disclose anything obviously sensitive, but let's see if this can be worked from a corporate perspective.
All right, should we do it? Should we dive straight in, or what's the sick? Awesome. Yeah. All right.
Cool. Ring.
Hello, Dave speaking.
Hi, Dave. It's Joe from Avalion. How are you doing today?
I'm not too bad, Joe. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Fighting some fires internally, but nothing new there really. Dave, thanks for picking up the phone. I know we've spoken a few times about pen testing and ISO and things like that, and I know how seriously you guys take your security. And the reason I was contacting you today is we've been supporting a lot of similar tech companies who've got a tremendous amount of risk exposure with their incident response planning and posture. Is that something we can have a little chat about today?
Sure. I'm in a bit of a rush, but I can always talk for 30 seconds.
No, appreciate you giving me a little bit of time. Dave, we've been having a huge amount of engagement in this area. We've got the former CIO of the British Army leading on this. So obviously he's got huge knowledge in terms of how to respond when you've had an incident, whether that be, a ransomware or a data breach or whatever it is. And the reason I contacted you guys, I know you're ISO 27001 compliant and you've got huge requirements there. And we're seeing a lot of similar companies are getting drive from their insurance companies to make sure they're actually testing their incident response plan. Have you been through an exercise previously?
So from my end, there's been a couple of occasions where I think our security team has, sent some false phishing type emails and things like that to test the team in that respect, but nothing past that from memory.
Okay, so you haven't done like a tabletop exercise where you've got all the key stakeholders on, where you look at, okay, guys, we've had a ransomware account attack. What do we do in terms of handling that breach initially? How do we handle that from a PR perspective?
Nothing like that.
No problem. But do you actually have the policies and procedures and a playbook in terms of how to handle all those sort of things?
Yes. We certainly have a bunch of policies. I can't say I know them word for word, but it's all contained in a central storage system.
That's great.
Everybody can access.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not something that you know off the top of the head, because really you don't want to be digging out those exercises unless those policies, unless there is a fire. And what I think the best thing, I'd like to set up a further call for us to discuss, is really testing those the robustness of those, making sure that they are fit for purpose, that everyone within your organisation understands their responsibilities and how they can contribute, and how they need to handle that situation. I think it would be a really good thing from you guys internally, because you take your security point so seriously. But also you'll get the added benefit if you'll be able to demonstrate that to your insurers and your client base, that you've not only got policies and procedures and a playbook in hand, but you're actually testing that to make sure it is fit for purpose and you're really able to respond in the worst case scenario.
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure like how much of a priority this is. Like, I don't think, to my knowledge, we haven't had a ransomware attack or anything like that, and I'm not sure how common they are.
Yeah, I can understand why it's not at the top of your priority list at the minute, and with most customers, it's not until the worst case comes round. And I don't want to focus on a FUD approach, but if you don't test them beforehand and then the worst does suddenly happen, giving me a call after the situation isn't going to give you much help. It's much better that you're prepared going into that situation and hopefully it never occurs than giving us a call after that horse has already bolted.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah. So I've got, I really want to bring Marcus on to this call as well, because so much of this engagement, and it will really help, if we do take things further forward, the experience he's got and how he's able to engage everyone and get the most out of these sessions. So I want to bring him on. I've got a few slots available over the next week. We can do Tuesday morning, we can do Wednesday afternoon, or we can do Friday morning. Are you available at any of those times?
Yeah, Tuesday morning. Tuesday morning works.
Okay, great. What I'll do is I'll ping you a Teams invite across for 10 o'clock. I'll send you a bit of pre-reading as well as Marcus's bio, and then we'll have a more in-depth chat on Tuesday morning.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thanks so much, Joe.
Cheers, Dave.
Awesome. That was great. Great job. Really great job.
Good job.
I'm sure everybody who's watching is also giving you a round of applause as well, Joe. Hopefully your team in the team is as well. I think Morgan's probably definitely going to kick off on the feedback, but as much as like we want to give feedback, I think it'd be great in the chat if people could give their feedback. I'm sure Joe would really appreciate that as well.
Yeah, and you can be as brutal as you want with me. That's the whole point of us doing this. I can make the mistakes in front of tens of people online rather than the customers that actually matter.
Awesome. Well, good to see you back again, Joe. And so this is something that you do really well, but also as a suggestion. So in the middle of the call, you were talking about the CIO of, I think it was England or something of that nature. I think that you said there. And I think that is something that you could lead the call with versus till later. So like that to me was like sounded like a lot of information or key information that like if I'm in the same role as what you're calling, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. If the CIO of X is doing that, maybe I should pay attention. And so I think leading with that being like, hey, I'm, Joe from whatever, just real quick, just wanted to tell you something I learned from the CIO of X that I just talked to. Is this something that you're currently looking to address? I think that like sparks attention faster and it gets to the point, because when I heard that, I was like, okay, that's interesting. If that person's intrigued, I need to be, I can get more engaged and lean into the conversation. So I would say that as well. I think what you did really good is you have a continuous pace of follow-up questions. I think maybe some of y'all picked that up, but he gets to the questions and he has really good pieces there. I think that's really good. And also as well, the breach, I think you handled that well. I think, anytime someone's like, well, I haven't had a breach yet, you obviously can flip it around and be like, hey, like, so what happens if that doesn't happen, right? Asking some follow-up questions. I think you did good there. So really my whole thing was that you can get to relevancy and get to something that sparks their interest faster. And I think that call would have been condensed and you would have scheduled the meeting faster. I think that's like the main piece that I'm getting to, because I felt like you had a lot of the information that was good later. And then earlier on, you were kind of like, okay, let's get to it. I think you could bring that up further and close the call faster.
Okay, cool. Really appreciate that, Morgan.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so from my perspective, Joe, you do a great job. You're such a natural conversationalist, and I agree with Morgan. One thing you do really well is you keep the conversation flowing and really nicely by always finishing whatever you're saying with a question, which is really good. There's been a couple of comments in the comment bit. I've just been reading them, and I think I do think so. I think making it a bit shorter is going to be important, a bit more punchy. I agree with the comments there. Specifically, the reason I gave you the objection of it's not a priority is because the one thing that I was thinking is at the start of the call, the way you were creating urgency was by saying, I know your company see this as important. But from my perspective, because I'm one individual, that, and I know you wouldn't necessarily be calling my persona, and maybe you'd be calling a CEO where it is naturally more important for them. But I think focusing on like why it's going to be so important for that individual now and creating that urgency at the start of your pitch is going to be really important. So perhaps, you mentioned insurance. It's actually interesting. Like I've over the past couple of weeks, I've become more aware of like company insurance related stuff. So it's interesting you saying that, and the difficulties there. And I think that, if you'd said, if you talked about, like the insurance side of things, and then back that up with perhaps like, we've saved X amount of money, or like, or we've saved people X amount of time with like, in the past, some kind of case study type thing to say exactly why people need to do it now. That's what I'd be thinking about in terms of like any changes. Overall, great. Just I think it's like, okay, what's the immediate, why does this individual need to come and speak to me right now? Like that's what you need to be more focused on at the start of the pitch, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's something I honestly am struggling a bit with. This is I can't demonstrate a return on investment or even a time improvement in process. It's actually making sure that when you're hacked, you can actually deal with it. What going through this process is, because most people have done these just to tick a box and they're really not fit for purpose, and then they go for an exercise and it's absolutely useless. And if they were breached, then they're in trouble.
You're selling more prevention and risk than anything. You're selling them like what is going to happen if they do not do this. So if they don't do it, they could lose millions in dollars. So it's not more so like the ROI of what happens if you get this in there as an advantage. It's no, you're actually selling prevention and risk. So it's like, if you don't do this, this is what will happen. It's like insurance, right? Like you could not get it, but when something bad happens, like it's not going to be a good day for you. So that's like the angle that you need to be thinking about is prevention and risk rather than ROI of you'll get advantage of X.
Yeah.
And that's
exactly what Dean said there. Thanks, Dean.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, we do something very similar. Oh, there's one angle that we have for pitching Cognism, which is, we boast about how we're GDPR compliant, or we are the compliant tool, and we have a bunch of articles. To be honest, if we think it's appropriate, it's obviously you've got to be careful about like fear mongering. But like, if we think it's appropriate, we will send articles that show like how bad it could be if you don't have the right data tool. So yeah, definitely just to support what Morgan said there. But overall, yeah, really great job. Like, it's just about I think just you need to create more urgency at the start.
Okay, perfect. Really appreciate your time again, lads.
Thanks for always tuning in, Joe. You're a legend. We need to send marketing. We need to send Joe a t-shirt or a hat or something.
We do. Shout out to Joe.